Good morning. Good morning. I am Maria O'Grady, Vice President and CFO with Financial Executives International. Thank you for joining us this morning for our session, The Ever-Evolving Role of a CFO, presented by Siegfried. Before we begin today, I'd like to cover a few housekeeping details. Please be sure that your cell phones are either turned off or silenced. Should you have any questions during the session, kindly raise your hand to be recognized. Please make sure that you've scanned in upon entering the session. Let's go ahead and get started. How has the role of CFO changed over time? What skills do companies look for when deciding on their next CFO? Please help me in welcoming our moderators from Siegfried, Rafal Fawad, Director, and Tiffany Watts, Managing Director. Rafal and Tiffany, I would like to turn it over to you to get things started.
Thanks so much, Maria. Good morning, everyone.
Morning.
Everyone have a good time last night?
Good.
A little bit. You can hear my voice. It was actually just from yelling at each other over dinner last night, but no, super fun event. So thank you to everyone from FEI for hosting a great conference. As Maria said, my name is Tiffany Watts. I'm a Managing Director at Siegfried in our Denver office, and we are probably going to hear a little bit of next door noise, so bear with me a bit. In case you're not familiar with Siegfried, our mission is to help people transform themselves into better leaders to exponentially improve their lives, which is fairly unique, I think, for a professional services firm focused in accounting and finance. But what we also do is help companies, clients get their most important projects done. So with me today, I have the pleasure to be with three of my favorite CFOs to talk through the ever-evolving role of the CFO. So I'm going to go ahead and let them introduce themselves. We're lucky to have a variety of different perspectives as well. You'll understand why I say that as soon as they introduce themselves. So Elizabeth.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Elizabeth Salomon. A little background on me. Thank you, Tiffany. Started my career in public accounting, I did an accounting fellowship with the banking regulators. I think this is to Coco's comment about a lot of different experiences really can form a career. I had finance leadership roles with the Fortune 100 company startup. I led internal audit during SOX year one, so that was really not fun at all. But I spent 15 years in a 4-time private equity software company CFO until last year, and I transitioned to a role where I'm working at the board level and as an operating advisor for private equity backed software CFO software company. So, Barb.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Barb Gutierrez, and like Elizabeth, I started my career in public accounting. I've been a CFO for a while. Dates me a little bit. Been a CFO for a while. Have had very deep experience in healthcare, although a number of other industries in public, private equity environments. And today I'm the CFO of Innovage Holding Corp., which is a publicly traded company. A little plug about Innovage, because it's an amazing program. I didn't say this yesterday. So Innovage, we are a program of all-inclusive care for the elderly, which is a federal program that provides healthcare and social services to the frail and poor elderly, mostly dual eligible. It's an amazing program. And so every time I even speak about it, I actually get goosebumps because it's just an amazing program to serve a very, very deserving population. We're headquartered in Denver. We operate in 5 states and adding another state very soon. We went public a couple of years ago. So I've been through this journey with this company of being private equity backed, taking on another private equity sponsor, and then going public in a pretty short period of time. So it's been a great journey, but that's my experience as a CFO.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Troy Schroeder. I serve as the Chief Financial Officer for Hazelden Construction in Denver, Colorado. Hazelden's a full-service general contractor. We're a commercial builder. We build hospitals and schools, and we've done casinos, and we build very high-end residential mountain resorts at places like Aspen and Somas and Steamboat. We operate throughout Colorado and Wyoming. We are privately held, so I have a little bit of a different background. I did grow up in public accounting, but then transitioned to privately held companies and navigated my way in that realm for the last, gosh, I forget now, but I've been with Hazelden now since 2002. I started as a controller, was promoted to the CFO back in 2012. Not very uncommon in privately held construction companies where the CFO has a variety that reports up underneath that role. So IT, HR, a lot of our risk management, insurance, postal, et cetera, reports up underneath it as well. So it really got
Well, thank you all for that introduction. And again, I want to just put it out there. Please ask questions. That's really what the intent of this session is. Understanding the, changing role of the CFO. It looks very different, of course, than it did 10 years ago, 20 years ago. And so would love to hear your input and feedback. But I'm going to kick it off just by asking our panel the question of, there is maybe two different paths that you could take to get to the CFO, two different traditional paths, one being finance side, one being accounting side. So I'm interested to hear, what you believe, how you've leveraged your prior skill set and what kind of skills, including leadership skills, you believe are, necessary or important for the CFO role. And Barb, I'll go ahead and start off with you.
Thanks, Tiffany. Yep. I think the CFO role, and I think everybody in the audience would agree, it's both. It's both finance and accounting. And I think that is part of the evolution of the CFO role. A while back, it was probably more focused on accounting. There was always the finance and the kind of BD role, but I think the CFO role has evolved to be both. And I think you can come from either direction. And the key is, whatever direction your background is, you just need to ensure that you've got staff or resources, internal, external, that complements the other side of that skill set. So I am a CPA, started my career in accounting. I will say I've spent most of my career, however, on the finance side of the house, even though that's not my background. But you just have to ensure that you've got really, really the resources and the staffing that complements each other, because it is both. And I think that's part of the evolution. I was talking to a colleague of mine about this presentation, chief medical officer, and I told him what the topic was. And I said something about the role of the CFO evolving and being more strategic. And he said, but that's not reset. That's happened a while ago. And I think that is true. I think what is a little different is that broader view and some other skill sets that have come into play. So really being less technical, less functional in some way. That, there's the macro, there's geopolitical, there's the macro economy, there's, risk management. And so having that bird's eye view of not only what's going on in your own organization, but what's going on in the broader world around us. And I think that's the evolution, the current evolution of the CFO role is, getting involved in things like risk or ESG, social issues, whatever it might be. And what was the other part of your question?
The leadership skills.
And the leadership skills. So I think that is, having, my colleague said yesterday, that curiosity, right? Having that intellectual curiosity and just, learning about things outside of the traditional finance and accounting. So that's one. I think a very important leadership skill is emotional intelligence, the EQ aspect. And because you're dealing with, constituents at all kinds of levels, employees, boards, investors, whatever it might be. And so really having that developing that skill, that emotional intelligence to read the room, to relate to people in a different way, and to exert influence. And I think those are some of the other skills that are probably less functional, less. Else?
I'll reemphasize the need to really develop your team so that you as a leader can make that leap, moving maybe from a controller or a real accounting role into that true leadership role. I can't emphasize enough how important my controller has been, that has leveraged me in my journey to make that leap. Just some of the technical accounting stuff that has come across, thankfully it's not much, but she's done a great job without having to pull me back down on the weeds and just giving me those opportunities to get out and really explore the business. And And that has made such a huge difference for me, just to be able to partner with the CEO, with the operations team, get involved with business development at times. It's been great. I can't emphasize that enough.
Yeah, I know people ask me that question a lot, coming up through the accounting or the finance, and it just reiterating, it just really doesn't matter. I am a CPA and keep my certificate up after all these years, but I spent very little time in the accounting. And so as you said, get the controller, I spend all my time as the CFO in the business. And that's when I'm on the board of 3 different companies working closely with the CFOs. And that's what I encourage them to do. I'm working with a couple first-time CFOs. So this is where your job should be business first. Make sure all the accounting functions are working correctly. Obviously, that's foundation. But that it really is about being at the forefront, and the CFO has a unique seat at the table.
Right. So one of the things I've kind of learned by speaking with the CFOs with all of you is that being an effective partner to the CEO is very integral to the role that you're filling, right? So I was curious a little bit, in your organization, how do you best effectively partner with your CEO? And then what are your recommendations on how to be the most effective?
Yeah, that's a great segue from the last question. So, you hear this term that CFO is the strategic partner, and what does that mean? And it really means helping the company achieve its strategy, their strategic goals. Every company's got a strategy. And the CFO, think about it, the CFO, outside of the CEO, the CFO is the only other person that really can see across the company. And, other executives have their own kind of silos. So it's a unique position. And CFOs have an opportunity and I think an obligation to really help drive strategic outcomes. And so, as I mentioned a second ago, foundationally, first of all, you do have to have the finance and accounting organization humming. You've got to have, that's foundational. You got to be closing the books. You got to be paying customers. All of that has to be in shape. And then you can spend your time as a CFO working with the business. So a few examples. And in fact, my motto, I would tell my teams, my motto is find ways to say yes. I remember my last CFO role, I inherited a team that was the no team. They always said no. You guys know this. That's the stereotype of all of us as finance leaders. And I had to make some changes on the team because our job is to find ways to say yes within reason and making sure we protect the company, right? And sometimes the answer is no, but it can't always be the first answer. So you have to be thinking about how do we help the company achieve objectives. So a couple of examples. A big one is in acquisitions. I've been part of probably over 30 acquisitions. And if you guys have been through that, you get it. CFOs and finance leaders have a key role to play in all aspects of that. The modeling, the diligence, is it a strategic fit? How do you fund it? Integration. And a lot of times, some of those actual responsibilities are other people. There's a deal guy or gal. There's other people that are responsible. But as a CFO, I always made sure that we had the right plan in all areas of that, even if I didn't own it. So how many times have you guys been in acquisitions? You get the deal. There's all this work to get the deal done. Everybody celebrates and everybody goes back to their day job and things fall apart when you're trying to integrate. So that's the 2 big areas I see where CFOs make sure you're paying attention is the modeling, make sure the assumptions are correct. In software businesses that I'm in, when you bring 2 software companies together, there's usually some cost on the back end to integrate those. Always underestimated. Make sure you get that right. And then the integration piece. Make sure if you're a company that's going to be very acquisitive, build a core competency in integration. Make sure you've got the right project, the right cadence, the right check-in. So those are some things where the CFO can really be effective. And I think, as Barb said, the EQ is so important because in this role, I, as the CFO, would play in areas that were other people's direct responsibility, but I felt it my obligation to make sure things were going smoothly. So the ability to influence in a smart way, intelligently, is very important. And I had a real life example. I worked for a CEO that was very successful, very entrepreneurial, and we would talk about investing in the specific example we were talking about investing in Latin America. And if any of you have done business in Latin America, there are a lot of risks and a lot of challenges in doing business there. So that's immediately what I thought of, right? As finance leaders, we're really good at thinking of the risks. And I think that's my job to bring them up. But I could tell he was getting frustrated with me in the conversation. So later I said, so, hey, boss, hey, I could tell you were getting frustrated. Do you not want me to raise the risk? That's kind of my job. And he said, yeah, just do it in a different way, right? So I learned to kind of let some of the conversation flow and then bring that in the right level. So, I think the CFO has a very unique position in being that strategic leader. And in my opinion, an obligation to do that. That's what I coach the CFOs at my companies to do.
So one follow-up question, and somebody from the audience asked this yesterday. How does that change with regards to the board of directors? And how do you effectively partner with them to kind of keep this flowing forward?
It's fun now. I'm on the other side. I'm on the board, and with my private equity boards, I play a more active role working with the CFO. So in the private equity land, if you're in there, it's a very active and ongoing relationship with the board. I'm also on a public company board and audit committee chair. It's a little more, it's not quite as ongoing, and not quite as active, but I do, work with CFO. So I think CFOs get to know your board, make sure, hopefully you've got a really productive relationship where management and the board are all in alignment on execution. The board is there, the resource. When I was a CFO, I used my, especially private equity boards a lot, asking their opinion on things, or, again, they're on boards of many other companies, so they see many other companies, so leverage that network, use them as a resource. Always respect the chain of command, though, up to the CEO, make sure you're not going around them. But the boards, and if you heard the session earlier, Coco's right. Like, the boards are getting more active. They're more engaged in a lot of different topics. It has evolved over the last, as she talked about, the last few years. And so don't be afraid of them. They can be amazing resources. And again, all of you are aligned for the same outcomes. So leverage.
Similar to Elizabeth, I also sit on a public company board, which has been about a year now, which has been part of my career journey. And so also, I think part of that evolving role of the CFO is just getting outside of the organization and learning some best practices. So I sit on both sides of the table. I try to learn from my audit committee chair and try to impart that to the audit. I'm also the audit committee chair to the CFO of the company that I sit on. So I think it is exactly what you said, leverage them, try to learn from a lot of experience, just be open to learning different experiences, and then to pass it on, to pay it forward when you're on the other side of the table.
All right. Thank you for the insights. And, Elizabeth, you mentioned earlier finding ways to say yes. I love that expression because you're right. I mean, people would refer to the accounting team in particular as like the police of the organization. But, I think taking that different lens of really being able to drive value in the organization, is a great way to look at the CFO role. So, Troy, I'd love to hear your thoughts on, how you get your team focused on driving value within the organization.
Yeah, so we've said a lot of it. And I think one of the best ways to drive value is the CFO is just to get involved and get outside the accounting and finance role. And, for us, I'll start with the accounting, but then as a reminder, I mentioned earlier, IT, HR report to me. So it's kind of that same philosophy as far as how my ultimate team drives value throughout the organization. And so our role is to really align with the overall strategic plan, make sure that we're all clear. When I say all, it's all those functional business units. We're all clear on who our customer is. It's primarily our construction operations team internally, but then HR, IT, it's everybody. And the value that we try to drive is to just clear internal roadblocks throughout the organization. the accounting department. I want them partnering with our business operations team in a way to help them identify project risks, things that are happening with the budget or production, things that are just happening in the field that the project teams might not be aware of. And I want the accountants bringing these things up to our operations team. IT, it's no longer about just making sure your email and computer works. We want a very well thought out IT stack. We want a very efficient reporting platform. And we want a great deal of integration. We want these systems working so that, again, back to our project teams and just everybody else throughout the organization is efficient in what they're doing. And then HR, their customer and the value they provide is throughout the entire organization. A lot of focus there, some of the internal that I described, but it's external as well. We're pushing value to our employees who are predominantly a 50% Hispanic workforce that oftentimes just won't take health insurance. It's just kind of a cultural thing. And so we've worked very hard to reduce those barriers so that that workforce can actually provide insurance to their families, and so that they can come to work not having to worry about what happens to their sick kiddo. Our 401k and just some of the other incentive comp that we offer, trying to lower those barriers so that someday this workforce that doesn't really trust the banking system can it will actually have a retirement savings. And we have over a 98% participation rate with over an 8% deferral, which for a construction company is pretty amazing. But again, that's some of the value that we're trying to provide the organization to engage the workforce. The idea being is that if we have an engaged workforce, people are efficient and just can kind of be their authentic selves when they come up, their entrepreneurial spirit, their problem solving, decision making skills come online, and it just helps push and promote the organization and the strategic plan.
Yeah.
That's hard act to follow.
Yes, great.
So what was your match? You get 8%.
Oh,
Match and goal.
so the match is it's a 5% match, but we've just taken advantage of some of the IRS guidelines that allow you to check certain boxes within your plan document and just getting automatic enrollments,
Yeah.
automatic increases, right? But we've been working on this. There's an education platform that we've come out with that in Spanish as well, and it's really worked well.
And I'm glad you asked that question, because I was just about to ask if anyone had any questions for the panel.
I actually have two, one's kind of a two-part question. So the first one is a one-part question for the ladies in the panel. How have you had to deal with, and I please forgive me for asking this question for the men in the room, but the old man's club, where you as a woman go in and you say, you give them a risk assessment, you give them your suggestions, and they don't listen. And because of that, issues sort of came up financially later on that you were sort of kind of waving the white flag about before that no one was listening to. How have you had to deal with that particular, or have you had to?
Okay. It's a tough issue. I will say, I'm old enough to say that I started my career in public accounting and it was male dominated, not that way today. I've also worked in industries. I worked in energy for a long time and I was literally the only woman at the table. But I think those are all really great experiences to just, it builds your muscle, it builds your thick skin. And you just have to just build on that to figure out, it kind of goes back to the whole EQ piece. You have to just figure out how to communicate effectively and how to influence and do it all effectively, right? And so you don't want to be the, always throwing the flag. You don't want to be the no, right? So it's finding that right way to be an effective communicator to put the risks on the table. I was sharing with the group, I worked for an entrepreneur for a long time, and he took a lot of risk, and he would also get annoyed with me because I would say, this is going to cost you some money. And I finally would just put a one-page summary together and say, here's the facts. It's your money. You do what you want. And he grabbed the paper, grabbed it from, signed it, and said, here, is that what you want? Go do it. And so but I had to find the way to just get my point across.
Yeah.
And communicate effectively. And I think it's just a skill you need to build. And so I've not been in a situation where I personally haven't, where I feel like I raised a flag and nobody listened, and then it kind of came back. But I guess I would just say it's about building that skill, how to communicate effectively and developing relationships.
And the other question I had was for the whole count. You mentioned your history. No one mentioned a degree. Do you have master's degrees, or has that been part of the evolution of the accounting finance function where experience sometimes outweighs the education piece or the need for a master's or a higher degree to be able to get into that higher level of position?
I personally don't have a master's degree. I'm old enough to have gotten my CPA without one. You remember back then, but I do have a CPA, and that got me my start. And then, obviously, I built my career, and the experience kind of, allowed me to get the next opportunity. I'll let the rest of the panel talk.
Yeah, same. Old enough that, that wasn't the requirement then, and it wasn't, just wasn't part of the equation.
The same, I got my CPA license. I think that probably opened up more doors. I do have a master's degree from the University of Denver, but I don't think it was, obviously, I think it's that. I think the experience and just the CPA license probably was.
And do you find that you can get it? There are ways to test out to get a CPA license based on your experience. If some colleges actually will allow that, or
I think it's a state by state issue.
Yeah.
Yeah, as far as if you report up underneath the CPA, you have to have the 150 hours.
Yeah. I believe Vermont's like that. That's right. I'm actually from, so.
Oh.
Thank you so much.
Perfect.
Okay, I have two questions for y'all. First one is, what keeps you up at night? The one thing that gives you insomnia. Okay. Second one is, if there's one thing you could change on your teams that would, step it up a notch, what would that be?
Good question.
I'm proud to say that I can go to sleep every night. And I have a good way of compartmentalizing my life. So I can get my rest and get up the next morning and then just attack the problems. The things that are top of mind for us is just right now with inflation and interest rates and how we're going to remain relevant and diversified, knowing that there's going to be a pullback, and we're already starting to see it with projects being canceled. And the big thing that I want to work through, and we're really trying hard to get ahead of it. In fact, I got a big meeting about it later today. It has to do with this impending pullback. And what I don't want to do is lay anybody off. We have we have really matured as an organization, and we are in such a great sweet spot. I don't want that to happen. I don't want that to happen. Was there another part?
And then the other part is, what would be one thing that your team, if you could, change on your team that would step it up a notch?
Probably as a leader to keep me leveraged and focused on the right things. I would say people that need really good problem solving skills and decision making capabilities. Because if they're doing that, they're pushing me and just kind of continue to push that up. And so I think they do a good job. But if there was one thing that might even be something better.
couple things keep me up at night. So I'm a horrible sleeper. Nothing to do with work. I'm just a horrible sleeper. So I'm in a highly regulated business. As part of healthcare, it's highly regulated. And so what keeps me up at night is really compliance related things, not just financial, but operational. And so it doesn't keep me up because I think we're doing anything wrong or I'm worried about it, but it is it's a highly regulated business. And so that's very stressful. You gotta pay attention to a lot of things in a kind of a different way. So I think that's probably it for me, as well as the broader macroeconomic things, the banking situation, and that sort of happened a little bit quickly, and just being on top of some of those things that hit you pretty quickly. In terms of my staff, the thing that I continue to work on with my staff, I have a wonderful staff, and I think they do amazing work. I'm really working with them to draw conclusions. They're really good about analysis and producing the statements, and they do great work, but just on an everyday basis, draw the conclusions from people. Don't just give them a bunch of data or a bunch of analysis. Like really be that business partner, that advisor. And they do for the most part, but just that's one thing I'm working on with them is, don't send people a bunch of data, just really help them, to be their business partner.
Yeah, I sleep okay, but things I'm worried about are, I think macroeconomic conditions. I'm on board with 3 different companies and starting to see it soften a little bit. The economist yesterday didn't make me feel any better. Totally depressing. Maybe the alcohol at that one. That was very discouraging. But I think, and making sure my companies are thinking about that. What are their contingency plans? And as a board member, kind of, what does that mean? The long-term debt is expensive. So how do you think about that from a cash flow perspective? I think for my team, like obviously I'm at the board level, but I'll answer for one of my CFOs, first-time CFO. So I'm spending a lot of time with him, and I think what he needs is we need some up leveling on his team to have more consistency in some of the forecasts and budget. Too many surprises. You set the budget and there's too many things. Oh, we didn't do this. We didn't miss that. The CEO is driving her crazy, and she calls me all the time. She goes, "There's another one." So we're working on how do we, have more consistency and rigor in their forecasting and budgeting process.
Thank you guys for being here. So we talked a lot about the future of CFOs and the toolkits, the emotional intelligence. But I'm curious, looking back at your past, some of the mistakes maybe or some of the challenges you guys incurred along your path to become a CFO. Did it, take you longer to become a person in this role that you wanted to be? Maybe discuss some of those challenges that you had to overcome. And some of those maybe have been opportunities. Sometimes they opportunities in disguise. At the moment, it may seem like a catastrophe. So, wanted to see if you had any, experiences that you could share with the group that may have worked in your favor.
So I shared this story yesterday. I've been with my firm long enough now where I've gone through two CEOs, and the first CEO was a real head-led leader. Right, very analytical, very sharp, and more of a business finance background along with just ecology of construction. Was very different than the second CEO. We all kind of came up together around 2012, 13, 14, 15 in there. And the new CEO was a heart-led leader, right? And they perceived they're very different leaders. And there for a while, I was having the hardest time connecting with the heart-led leader. And I can, me personally, I can make the journey from my head to my heart a little easier, but I'll start here. And, I started talking to a lot of different people, kind of realized that, is it him, is it me? What is it? Turns out it was me. Right? And just understanding the different ways to communicate with him, being able to present data to him, just connecting in general. It was a real challenge. And there for a while, I didn't know if I was gonna, be able to make this leap. And so what it did for me is it just continued to, highlight the need to be that situational leader. It happened to be with the CEO, but it doesn't matter if because I'm a sitting board member on our company too, right? If I happen to interact with the board, the prior CEO, who's now the chairman of the board, right? I have to be able to move in and out of different situations, different people, adjust my communication style and approach to be able to connect, convey information, data, etc. So that was I just condensed everything into about a 2-year journey. It was interesting.
So in terms of this, the CFO path, you mentioned it did take me longer or not. So I did have a challenge when I was younger, and I think I was maybe a younger CFO, and as opposed to being a woman. Just getting that credibility and the experience. But fortunately, I think like a lot of us, and I know Elizabeth's talked about this, I had some good mentors who really said, you can do this. I remember actually telling my husband, my first CFO role, I'm in over my head. And he goes, yeah, you are, but you'll figure it out. And so I tell that to my kids now, right? And so, yeah, so I think, and so, you just gotta have that confidence and just keep kind of moving forward. What was the second part of your question? I'm really sorry.
No, just something that challenging things that are common.
Mistakes that turn out to be opportunities.
Oh, mistakes. Yeah, I actually have a good story. Sorry, I don't want to dominate that, but yeah. So in my current role, I ended up in my current role because of the previous role. I was recruited on a confidential search for a private equity firm, healthcare. Turned out to not be a great opportunity. I was replacing a CFO. She stayed on board. Turned out to be wonderful. But the opportunity just really wasn't what I expected. And I was pretty miserable. Actually, I felt like I really made a mistake in taking this opportunity. But she got a call for the role I'm in, and she wasn't interested in taking that next role, and she passed it on to me. So it was, we all kind of joke now, we're friends, and we say we were each other's ticket out. And so, it just is one of those things that you just never know where somewhere, how it's gonna lead you.
Yeah, so I was very fortunate. So I think early on it was more the confidence. I think being, I remember when as a former colleague went to become a CEO of a software company, and he calls me a few months later and said, I want you to come be my CFO. And it was a turnaround situation. The company was bleeding cash, and first time CEO, first time CFO. I said, are you sure? Like, you really want me? And he said, yes. He had more confidence in me than I did. We ended up working together twice. Now I'm working together again with him. He's chairman of these companies that I'm on the board of. So it's nice to have that. I was lucky to have that. As far as mistakes, there's many. So we'll pick a few. One was when my first time CFO, it was I moved to the Midwest. And it was a company, again, founder-led company, 30 years, just didn't have the right infrastructure. I had to build out a whole FP&A function. And I had hired someone at my previous company. I convinced her to move. She was just a rising young superstar. We've all had those on our team. I convinced her to move to the Midwest, and she was really great. And I needed her, but her ego got a little big, and she just decided she was great, and everybody else at the company was not, and she acted that way every day. And I waited too long to fix that. I realized, because I needed that, but once I saw, that was a big learning for me, is the power of the team, and one person isn't better than a team. And so I saw, I kind of knew there was some dysfunction in the team, and but I waited way too long, and it was very tough. I had to let her go, and she had moved, to come work here. But as soon as I did, the whole team lifted. And so that was a very big learning for me early on in my C-level career.
My exercise is important.
I know that some companies, when it's a smaller company, the CFO is sometimes running the accounting department instead of being that strategic leader. How have you, Elizabeth, I think you mentioned one of your CFOs is very involved or has issues with budget season. I feel like at a certain size company, the CFO simply sees the budget at a high level, they're not very involved. So what recommendations do you have to come from a CFO that's running the department and working in the business to one that's working on the business, being that strategic leader?
That's tough when it's a small team, and generally finance teams, we are challenged to be as effective as we can. We're not really generally allowed to build large organizations. I think the key is to make sure that you are tied in with the strategic objectives with the company and making sure that the budgets really fit that, right? And also getting ownership from the business leaders, even if you're in the weeds a little bit with it, make sure you're tied in with the business leaders, that they're joined at the hip and you understand that they're with you in this budget process. And then do your best to step back and see if it all makes sense at the end of the day, right? I think CFOs, even at all levels, are going to be involved in the budgeting process because they have to understand that they're usually the ones presenting it to the board. They're usually the ones that have to, again, make sure that things go according to that plan along the way. But it is tough. I think sometimes when you are in the weeds, take a moment and be able to step back and go, okay, does this all make sense? When you think about what would a board member look at? Okay, what is the revenue growth rate? What is our profitability? What is cash flow? If you think about those things, then even if you take an hour or two to do that, then hopefully that will allow you to kind of stay at the high level that you need to. It's tough sometimes when you're down in the weeds. You guys know that. It's so much easier to be up here to be able to see that. But if you have to do both, just give your time to reflect at the high level.
I'll reemphasize what I was saying earlier too, is really invest in your controller, county manager, whatever depth that is. Really make a concerted effort with development plans, and if needed, replace the position if you're the CFO and you're acting more like the controller. Is that a skill set gap? Can it be developed, or do you have to look outside? So I challenge you to take a hard look at that, because if that layer below you is pulling you down, it's going to be really hard to get out of it and work on the business.
So this question may essentially be another version of the same question you just answered, but I still think there may be some room for you to share. The strategic focus for finance and accounting is going from like less than 10% to like 50%. They want the KPIs, they want all this stuff. So what are some of the things that you recommend so that we can move from 10% being strategy and 90% tactical to 50-50? That's good.
Okay, thinking. Yeah. I think it is the right skill set of people and the right tools. And so we also are a very data-driven decision-making organization, and we really focus on providing that data, not just for us, but for the operational folks. And so just have added some different skill sets, people that are more, maybe less accounting, not somebody who's doing modeling, but who's really analytical and that can develop those KPIs. And we've invested in some new tools that are more self-serving. So we do a lot more self-service for our business. We push our financial statements, and we push a lot. And so that's been a way that we've done that, is just to try to find the right people and the right tools that make it more front and center, as opposed to, and personally, I like to drive with KPIs when I review financials. I don't like to walk down a financial statement. So I think it's just flipping the focus and really focusing on the KPIs to explain the results.
I think it's probably 80% at the CFO level too. I mean, and speaking for myself in my recent CFO gigs, that's where I spent all my time. And to Troy's point, had the right controller. I had to make sure everything was in place, in the team. But I think things that help you do that is that business focus. You have to This is what I would encourage. I had great controller, 2 different companies, and just incredible. But his growth area is to go understand the business and get out in the business and start thinking business, right? You have to be that business partner for, as you get higher up. So get involved in things. For example, things I would, and I hope this is an answer to your question, but things I would get involved in is I was in a company and the strategy was high growth. So, all right, we're going to invest in sales and marketing. Let's make sure I spend a lot of time with the sales leadership. Do we have the right sales plan? Do we have, if we're going to have 50% growth in our new business, do I have the right quota capacity on the street? It'd be a big problem if you were going to plan on 50% growth, but that would then assume that every sales rep had to hit 3 times their quota to make it happen. So do you have the right assumption for attrition? So spending time and understanding those key metrics, but out in the business. And remember, the financials are the lagging indicators. You want to look at, the leading indicators to make sure that you're funding the business, you have all the right metrics. So I guess if I summed it up, it would be being out there with the business on things that really will drive the results consistent with the strategy. I hope that's the answer to your question.
That's a great answer.
Okay, good. Love that.
Go here and then Tito.
So this next question is for Elizabeth. So you mentioned respect the chain of command in your communications, and I've served as a CFO of both public companies and private equity held companies. Being the CFO of a public company, it's pretty easy. I mean, an analyst call you, whether it's a sell side or a buy side analyst, you can't really tell them anything other than talk about the economy and the industry and nothing about the company. Otherwise, you got to do an SA. With a private equity, you've got these 25-year-old Ivy League geniuses calling you like 3 times a day, and your CEO is traveling, and how do you make sure that you keep the CEO plugged into these things that are filtering into the private equity companies?
Oh yeah, I love that too. It's fun. They're great. These young, they're so smart, right? They're so smart. You build, and I was a private equity CFO. I love working with private equity. Now I'm on the other side of it, so it's kind of fun. The key is, certainly when they would call with requests for things all the time, I didn't tell the CEO about that all, but if there was anything of importance, I just made sure that he was in the loop. I said, oh, they're asking about this, they're asking about that. They want to know when our latest forecast is. But you start to build a trust where, in fact, during budget season, I requested a weekly informal meeting with the younger team, the analysts, before we had official board check-ins, so we could have informal feedback, and it made it just a lot more efficient. I said, hey, can we just meet weekly? Here's what we're thinking, here's what we're seeing. So by the time we got to the formal reviews, we had flushed a lot of issues out, and it just got wrapped up a lot more quickly. So yeah, I wasn't calling the CEO every time I got a call from one of those people, but it was more anything of significance. If they're concerned and they're like, wow, I'm concerned about your churn metrics, those things, I would make sure the CEO knew that. And he also had weekly check-ins with them, and it would kind of come around. So I found that private equity environment very open, very collaborative, and I enjoyed it. I enjoyed working with it. It's fun to be on this side of it too. But yeah, you can't tell them every little thing that you do because it'll drive them crazy.
Thank you for this engaging presentation. So it sounds like you all have a very maybe similar backgrounds. You started in public accounting and kind of you moved up. Can you reflect on a key moment, whether it's a key moment, a differentiator, a relationship, or just sheer act of luck that helped you move from public accounting into maybe your first job in the industry, but then somehow reaching that CFO or board level leadership position?
Yeah, I'll start and then pass it around. I think it just goes to just building some good relationships with and in some ways being lucky to have good mentors. And I was in public accounting, and I was not on any healthcare clients. I was in energy, financial services, and some manufacturing. but I worked for a manager who also had healthcare experience, and when she left, she went to a hospital system, she recruited me to follow her. So I think it is just, you know, in some ways, maybe that's a relationship, maybe it's luck. But I think that's one example, to kind of set me on my path. That was good. You know, so I think in some ways it's luck, but I think it is, but in some ways I think it is also seek out those mentors. And I think seeking out a mentor is really helpful. And as I progress through my career, I try to pay it back, pay it forward, whichever direction, and really try to help younger folks, do some mentoring.
Yeah, maybe a little bit of luck, right, through networking, but then it's not luck when you just start putting yourself out there. So if there's one thing I could recommend is just get out there. Let people know what your intentions are. Let people know what you're passionate about. And that has a way of just coming around. We were having a conversation about that last night I was with Elizabeth. Just letting her know what, you know, might be interesting for the last, 10 to 15 years of my career. And that just, I think that has helped. So I can't underemphasize enough to get outside your office and get involved.
I think for me too, I was willing to do different things. So I was in public accounting. EY nominated me and I work with bank clients. So they nominated me for an accounting fellowship at the banking regulators, and I had to compete and I got it. But I went to DC to work for the chief accountant of the OCC. Very exciting bank accounting topic. So, but I'll never forget this and we helped make bank regulatory rules. And so the chief accounting asked me in one of our first meetings, he said, there's a new rule, a new accounting standard come out. And he asked me, he's like, what do you think the rules should be? And I'm like, I don't know. I always interpreted the rules as an auditor. So it really expanded my skill set. And I did that for 2 years. And I always thought I'd go back to EY and be a partner in their national banking group in New York. That was always the plan. And I was fortunate that just opened a door. I had banks coming to me to ask me, to come work with them. And so that's what I decided to do. Went to a bank which became B of A, got into technology. I ran there, I was the controller for their technology division. And that led me on a path to, a technology career that I've been on the last half of my career. So I think and then I did internal audit, never thought I'd do that, but it was incredible. I learned a ton, but we did all the acquisition due diligence. So just being willing to try different things and all of that experience helps me be in the role that I am today. So, get out there, be willing to try different things.
Great. I think we're right about a time. Great way to end and great question. What I would say is, I don't think it's ever luck. Kind of as an outside person hearing what you just said, it really is putting yourself out there and building those relationships. Foundation of technical knowledge is a good thing, but that's only going to get you so far, right? You're no longer a technician as CFO. I would argue. So please join me in thanking our panelists. Really appreciate all the insights and thank you all for all the wonderful questions. You can, if you haven't seen the green screen in the exhibit room, you haven't been in there. We're right front and center, so come say hi to us and learn more about us. Thank you.